I still remember the day the lawyer called me in. The house felt colder than usual, the walls echoing with a silence that seemed to mock me. My husband, Edward Hale, had passed just 2 weeks earlier, and grief was still fresh, raw, and unkind. I thought the reading of his will would bring closure, maybe a small sense of stability after losing the man I'd spent 32 years beside. But instead, it changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the son I raised. Nathan, our only child, sat across the long oak table in that lawyer's office, eyes fixed on the documents. He didn't look at me once. The lawyer's voice was calm but heavy as he read out the contents of Edward's final testament. All assets, properties, and financial accounts shall be inherited by my son, Nathan Hale. My hands trembled as I waited for the next line, the part that would mention me. It never came. Not a word, not a mention. Not even the small lakeside cottage where Edward and I spent our summers. Just silence. Nathan didn't flinch. He folded the papers, thanked the lawyer, and finally looked at me with eyes colder than I'd ever seen. "It's what Dad wanted, Mom," he said, as if rehearsed. "You'll be fine." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think there was some explanation, maybe an oversight, or that Edward had planned to amend things but didn't live long enough to. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. My son, the same boy I'd carried through storms and sleepless nights, was no longer looking at me with warmth. He was looking at me like a responsibility he didn't want. That night, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by boxes I didn't remember packing. Nathan had called movers without telling me. He told them to take me to the small unit on Crescent Lane, a one-bedroom apartment I hadn't seen in years. I didn't argue. I just stood there watching strangers carry my life out piece by piece. When the last box left, I turned to him. "Why are you doing this, Nathan?" I asked quietly. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mom, you don't understand. The house needs maintenance, insurance, taxes. You can't handle that. It's better this way." "I can still live in my home," I whispered. He looked away. "It's not your home anymore." That broke something inside me. Not the loss of walls or furniture, but the loss of being wanted. The apartment was small. Old radiator, cracked paint, a window that faced an alleyway. Still, I tried to make it feel like home. I placed Edward's photo on the table, brewed tea the way he used to like it, and whispered a quiet prayer for strength. Days turned into weeks. Nathan didn't call, didn't visit. I told myself he was busy, that grief made people act differently, but deep down, I knew better. He had what he wanted now, the inheritance, the house, the control. I had memories. The loneliness was sharp, but familiar. I took small jobs, mending clothes, babysitting, anything to keep busy. My neighbors were kind enough. There was Mrs. Delaney from 2B, who always brought leftover soup, and a young man named Eli upstairs, who played guitar late into the night. They reminded me that kindness still existed even when it no longer came from the ones you loved most. But fate has a way of circling back when you least expect it. It was a rainy Thursday when it happened. I was sitting by the window, patching a coat, when a knock echoed through my thin wooden door. It was hesitant, uneven. I frowned, wiping my hands on my apron, and shuffled to answer. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. Nathan stood there, soaked, pale, eyes swollen as if he hadn't slept in days. For a moment, neither of us spoke, just the sound of rain falling between us. "Mom," his voice cracked. "Can I come in?" I wanted to say no, to tell him that doors swing both ways and he'd close this one himself, but the mother in me couldn't. I stepped aside, watching him walk into my little apartment, the same son who once pushed me out of my own home. He sat at the edge of the chair, shaking. "Something happened," he murmured. I didn't know where else to go. I studied him quietly, his expensive coat, wrinkled and damp, the confident air he once carried gone. He looked small, lost. "Sit," I said softly, pouring him tea. "Start from the beginning." He hesitated, eyes glistening. "The house, it's gone, Mom." "Gone?" He nodded, voice trembling. "A deal I made went wrong. They took everything. The company, the house, the accounts. I didn't listen to you, I thought I knew better, and now I have nowhere to go. For the first time in years, silence between us didn't feel heavy, it felt human. He looked up, guilt painted across his face. I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything. I didn't say anything. I just watched him, my son, my lost boy, sitting in the same broken chair I'd patched myself, realizing that sometimes life's lessons don't come in time, but they always come. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of ours. Nathan's confession hung in the air like the echo of thunder after a storm, soft but impossible to ignore. He sat there, shoulders shaking, trying to piece together the wreckage of his choices. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to tell him that he had done this to himself, that the arrogance he wore so proudly had finally led him here. But when I looked at him, not as the man who sent me away, but as the boy who used to run barefoot through the yard, chasing fireflies, my heart softened. A mother's love, no matter how bruised, doesn't just disappear. He rubbed his hands together nervously. I didn't see it coming, Mom. The partners I trusted, they turned on me. They said I mishandled funds. I swear I didn't. But I signed everything over, thinking I was protecting what Dad left us. Us. The word stung. Your father worked his whole life for that company, I said quietly. He believed in honesty, in doing things the right way. Somewhere along the line, Nathan, you forgot that. He lowered his head. I know. The kettle whistled softly in the background, a small reminder that life, in its ordinary way, always keeps moving. I poured him another cup of tea, my hands steady now. You can stay here tonight, I said, but after that, you'll have to decide what you're going to do next. Running from mistakes doesn't fix them. He looked up, surprised. You're letting me stay? I nodded. I may not have much, Nathan, but I still have a heart. I won't see my son out in the rain. For the first time since Edward's funeral, Nathan smiled, a faint, fragile thing, but it was there. It reminded me of when he was 10, missing his front teeth, and brought me dandelions from the yard, saying they were real flowers. Somewhere deep inside, that grown man still lived the little boy who once just wanted to make me proud. That night, he slept on the couch, wrapped in an old quilt that had more stitches than fabric. I stayed awake in my room, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Edward. I could almost hear his voice steady and kind. He'll learn, Margaret. Sometimes, lessons need the storm. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds. Nathan was already awake, standing by the stove, trying to make breakfast. The smell of burnt eggs filled the room, and I couldn't help but smile. Still can't cook, can you? I teased gently. He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in far too long. Guess not. We ate together in silence, the kind of quiet that wasn't heavy anymore. Afterward, he pulled out a small envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the table. What's this? I asked. It's all I have left, he said softly. A few $100. I want you to have it. I shook my head. No, Nathan. Keep it. You'll need it to get back on your feet. Tears welled in his eyes. After everything I did? After I took your home? I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. You didn't take my home, son. You just made me realize it wasn't made of bricks and walls. It's made of forgiveness and you. He broke down then, silent, trembling sobs that carried years of pride, guilt, and regret. I didn't stop him. I let him cry, because sometimes tears are the only way to clean the rust off a weary soul. In the weeks that followed, Nathan stayed with me. He found small jobs delivering groceries, helping fix things around the building. Every evening, we'd sit by the window with tea and talk about the past, the mistakes, and the lessons. Slowly, the distance between us began to close. Mrs. Delaney from 2B would sometimes see us laughing in the hallway and whisper, "It's good to see love mending again." And she was right. Healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in small, steady acts, washing dishes together, sharing silence, saying thank you, where once there was resentment. One afternoon, Nathan came home with a small box in his hands. "I got something for you," he said, placing it on the table. Inside was a framed photograph of the old family house, restored and printed from an online listing. Below it, a small note in his handwriting read, "I can't bring back what I took, but I can remember what matters." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," he replied quietly, "because I finally understand what Dad meant when he said wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in what you can still give when you've lost everything." I smiled through the tears, touching his cheek the way I did when he was little. "Then you're richer than you think, my son." Years later, people still ask me how I managed to forgive him, how I could open my door that night after what he did. But I tell them this: when a mother closes her door to her child, she also locks her own heart. And no lock, no matter how strong, can survive the ache of love left outside in the rain. Sometimes life gives us pain not to punish us, but to polish the truth hidden beneath. My son inherited everything once: the house, the company, the wealth. But it was only when he lost it all that he found the one thing he never realized he'd thrown away: us. And as I sit here now, with a cup of tea cooling beside me and the photo of Edward smiling from the shelf, I finally understand what peace feels like. Not grand, not loud, just a quiet home filled with forgiveness, and the sound of my son's laughter echoing down the hallway once again.